helping Noah out in 404. Atumomo didn't die either. Lavier on the Railing Soul, he tried time and time again to go ball lane and pick up kills, and eventually, they have to work, but here we go. We see Unsold Stuff Gaming first banning Zac. They don't want to see that on Steel, and that makes a lot of sense. That's an incredibly powerful jungle. We've seen Steel last week on the Sejuani, another tank style jungler, partly because it's banned away from them, but also that Galio. That Galio has been such a strong flex pick and really hasn't seen nearly as much top lane play here in Japan as it has around the world. Atumomo played it last week a little bit, but it didn't necessarily have the same kind of effect they would want it to as when they've been playing it in the mid lane. Saros has had great performance, had a great performance on it. Ramune just had a great performance on it, and the power to move it wherever you want, and even just be like, hey, we don't know what we want to do with this yet. We just know we want this champion because it's strong. Is something that they're going to take off the table. On the other hand, Lee Sin and Syndra being bound out away from Unsold Stuff. Remind is a fantastic player for the team, and he really has some crazy lane dominance, and later on is able to get tons of damage onto whatever member he wants, as well as the Ivern. Neo was one of the few players in Japan that had picked up the Ivern last split, and he really helped bring his team into a great spot for really the rest of spring. And right now, Detonation FocusMe, without having seen it a whole lot, is going to be banning that away. And it does mean the Oppaman does get to grab the Zyra for Enti. Now, this is a little bit interesting. A couple of the major junglers have already been banned out. Lee Sin, Ivern, and the Zac, and no surprise, Paz is hovering over that Elise, who is the last of the top tier of junglers available in the game right now. And it's going to be something great. You want to put Steel on something comfortable, Steel on something that he is able to really carry through this game because he is a quite capable player, and they're going to back it up with a Caitlyn coming out for Utapon. Caitlyn, 7.10 is a little bit of a last hurrah for Caitlyn. She's incredibly strong on that patch, with the Runins still stacking up the headshot incredibly quickly. And Utapon, being such an aggressive ADC in the bot lane, is able to build up those early leads, hit those zeal item spikes much earlier. And it's going to be a fantastic pick for him, just having lane dominance provided by the incredible range that character provides. Neo's going through a lot of things. USG throwing up their hands as like, what's kind of going on? They do end up locking in that Jace, but I would not be surprised if we saw a remake here, as USG, especially Neo, there's like, I don't know about that one. They're smiling though, so it'll be interesting to see what exactly goes on. Mine has not locked anything in quite yet. They do have the Jace and they do have the Ashe. And the referee in the background looks to be talking to Neo. We're definitely going to be seeing a remake in just a couple of moments, I have no doubt. But the Jace pick, it's a solid pick. It's something that you can flex into the top lane and the mid lane. And yeah, there we go. Cut away to Eyes and Revel, our counterparts over in Japan. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what will happen, how they choose to go about that drafting phase, because on the face of it, I did not like the early draft picks coming out from USG. The Zyra is a very odd thing to focus, especially when so many supports are still available. You still have the Karma, you still have the Lulu, you still have the Thresh was banned away, but with so many options available to you, getting the Zyra is not the kind of early pick you necessarily want unless there's a strategy that USG can really show us that we aren't necessarily familiar with. The first banning Zac as the blue side is also a very interesting choice. By banning it first, you relieve a lot of pressure on the red side, saying, hey, you're going to be able to get your bans the same way you wanted, and now you kind of have an extra ban, because we've talked a little bit about how the power of Zac on 7.10 means that it is going to draw a ban from the red side simply because you absolutely have to. Zac provides so much power, and unless you're trying to cheese it, like Rampage did in Game 1 versus Rascal Jester, and just steal away all of his camps and put him super far behind, it's not going to, you're going to have difficulty dealing with it. And we've seen Cuz, I believe it was LG Cuz, played it incredibly effectively. last week, where when coupled with the Thresh with the Dark Passage, he can jump in with the Elastic Slingshot, go so far, and then just take a Lantern out, and he's totally fine. He's not punished for making incredibly aggressive moves. On top of that, he's just an incredibly powerful jungler. He stays very healthy in the jungle relative to what he used to simply because he gets an extra blob every time he uses that Q. So he gets a little more health regen, especially once he has the Spirit Visage. Um, and he's just so powerful. He's able to do whatever he wants. He comes in, has incredible gank pressure, farms incredibly well, and then he moves into the late game and becomes an incredible tank with so much CC available. Getting the new Let's Bounce, just getting everybody on the team into one spot, you set up for an incredible wombo combo, which before you kind of denied wombo combos a little bit from your own team. It was not unusual to see people go in with a Zac Jarvan, bounce people outside of the Cataclysm, bounce people outside of the Bullet Time, bounce people outside of the Shockwave. But now that all of this is available together and just putting it all in the same spot, it's in a much stronger team fight position than it was even before when he was already a fantastic team fighter. But banning it away first means that you're choosing to give up a ban on your own. And unless it's sending a message, which we didn't necessarily see coming out from USG so far, it's not necessarily the most effective thing to do. And I'd like to see them, if they have the option, to go back and change their bans and force Detonation FocusMe to ban that out against you. It's a free ban. You don't need to worry about it. And with Neo being able to play a variety of champions, even that Evelyn, which he had a very poor game on, you don't bring that kind of thing out at this level of play unless you're confident in that champion. And ultimately, it was a very bad game, but it was just a bad game. Even still, players like Remind and Heretti were able to do a pretty good job of shoring up their weaknesses presented in that game. Remind had some great shockwaves, which eventually pushed through and won them the game versus Rascal Jester. Heretti just very safe, and Heretti was if Utori was the best ADC in spring, which I would very much make the argument that he was, Heretti was a little bit of a kryptonite. We saw during the playoffs actually that against Heretti and Anti's Karma, Utori was not able to build up CS advantages and was actually behind in lane, something we're not necessarily really used to seeing from Rampage's bot lane. Dara and Utori are just so incredibly powerful, but Heretti and Anti are able to stand up to that bot lane. Now the question really remains, will they be able to stand up to Utapon and Vivid? As Utapon is a much more aggressive, much more lane-dominant style of player, and given something like that Caitlyn is going to be very dangerous for them to deal with, simply because Heretti is a little bit more passive, a little bit more Utori style, just wants to farm it out, wants to be able to build an advantage in the mid game and come to team fights ahead. Utapon is like, nah, I'm just going to get the advantage right now, going to force you out of lane. And we saw last week, he actually played the Kog'Maw and just had complete control over wherever his lane opponent was going. Um, yeah, he just was able to bully out Rokenya, went 4-0-5 on Kog'Maw, completely deathless with only the Lulu, which, saying only Lulu is a little bit of a misnomer. Lulu is an incredibly strong champion, but pushing around Rokenya, just completely able to do whatever it was he felt like and just go super aggressive whenever he wanted to. Caitlyn does the same, does a very similar thing, scales very hard, and just has a much stronger early game, at the expense of a much weaker mid game right now. In USG, we're going to be getting back into it. This is not the first time we've had a champion select problem today. For anybody who's been watching, we did see a similar issue with Rampage, I believe it was. They were unable to trade their champions toward the end of the champion select, and we did end up having a remake of the champion select there. Hopefully whatever issues we have on this server will be getting fixed shortly, as I would like to be able to get into games as quickly as possible, as it is nearing 4 a.m. here in Seattle. I love staying up, I love casting the LJL, but I also love sleep. But it's a good thing that we have caffeine. But it looks like the pause is coming to an end, and we will be getting back into Champion Select in just a moment. As Eyes and Revel joke about whatever it is, man, having a co-caster is really nice. I just have to say, if anybody is shoutcasting and is not used to, shoutcasting on your own, it's much, much more draining. You have to keep up the energy all on your own. You have to come up with all the talking points on your own. Whereas with a co-cast, you can lead a lot of questions. But we are going back into the pick and ban, and we do see that Ash Zyra picked up a very common, a very standard bot lane coming out from Unsold stuff, as well as the Jarvan pick being covered here for Oppaman. He did not play that last week. I don't believe. No, he definitely did. He definitely did, and it just looks like the notes I had written down had not properly selected the Jarvan for it because it looks like he played Aatrox, but I know that's incorrect. He had some fantastic, absolutely fantastic cataclysms last game, but we also see the Jace coming down here, picked by Saros, but that could very easily be going over to Paz. Paz is a much more aggressive top laner than what we're often used to seeing in Japan. And with the Reminds Orianna being banned out, that's not a surprise at all. Jarvan Orianna, one of the strongest combinations of champions right now in the meta. The Cataclysm combined with the Shockwave is going to get everyone in one spot, do a crap ton of physical and magical damage to them all at the same time. And we're just going to see a lot more focus right here. But Jace is a very good pick right here in the draft because it can be flexed to the top lane or the mid lane. And we're really going to see Vivid's pick at the end. I'm sure Utapone, as their fourth pick, is going to grab a support for Vivid in just a moment. And with the Tom Kench banned out against him, it's not really surprising, but potentially not the strongest ban. There, he still has the Karma, he still has the Lulu available, and now we are going to, this Jace could be potentially flexed. It's not the greatest thing against Jarvan, but it can definitely hold its own, especially with the early damage that it provides. But it could also simply be going over to Saros, and I'd be surprised if we saw this Warwick locked. I don't believe we've seen a lot of Warwick throughout the rest of the world, but it is locked in, and that's almost definitely going to be in the jungle with Antis locking in that Cassiopeia for Remind. The ball is in DFM's court as to exactly what it is they want to play against this interesting composition brought out, and I do like the Warwick pick so far, but it will really depend on what they want. Paz looks like he's thinking about what he wants to play, meaning that this Jace is almost definitely going over to Saros, and it is going to be the Kennen up in the top lane. So, interesting composition coming out from DFM. Doesn't have a whole lot of engage tools. Is going to rely a lot more on the strong sieging potential it has between the Jace, the Caitlyn, and the Karma. Whereas on the other hand, USG is looking to fight. They have the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, they have Warwick's ultimate, and just a flag and drag into Cataclysm that Jarvan provides, and they can start a fight pretty much whenever they want to. So DFM needs to have a lead with the poke composition they've built up, or they need to find some good picks before they go anywhere. We are going to be loading into the Rift in just a moment. USG versus DFM, everyone. These is going to be a close series between these two teams, two very strong teams. As we see the coaches meeting up in the mid lane. Not the mid lane, in the middle of the stage. And they're going to be going right into the Rift. I like Vivid's hair. It kind of reminds me of my own hair, actually. I actually dyed my hair very blonde back in high school. Would not recommend. I'm not going to show pictures, but it's a it was a fun time to be alive. But here we go. Utapone very close to the camera there, actually. He's a tall guy. I don't think he's that tall, though. Maybe he's just leaning forward. For anybody who watches other esports as well, you'll see like a huge difference. You'll watch Counter-Strike players, and they'll have their face right up to the monitor. It helps with reaction times or something, or vision, or whatever. I don't really know, but they do it anyway. But here we go. Now, Warwick coming out for Neo in the jungle. We're going to have to see if he can get some good ultimates on people, lock them down, and force out those early Quicksilver sashes from the rest of the team. It's not something you can cleanse, I believe. It definitely wasn't something you used to be able to, but right now, Saros is going to be running the cleanse anyway. He's got a very strong champion there in the mid lane, potentially looking for an early advantage, starting with that longsword and a bunch of Dorn's shields coming out here in the top lane as well. Both Paz and Opperman wanting to really reduce the amount of damage they take, as they both are not quite certain of their ability to solo kill the enemy team. Nothing particularly exciting coming out right now. We do see a lot more. Whenever there's a Zyra in the game, you'll see a lot of people heading down to the bot lane immediately. See if they can poke Zyra out, because otherwise she's just going to get her seeds, her little children, out on the entire rest of the field, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. As we see Utapon and Vivid just trying to step on them, get a little bit of gold into their pockets by killing the plants, but they're taking a decent amount of damage in return. We already see a good chunk of Vivid's health being taken down. But look at that. The voting between these two teams is very, very even. Both, all of the Twitterverse does know that these teams are pretty close, especially based on what they were last season. And look at that damage getting put down onto Reddy, and that's just the aggression that Utapon really brings. Enti only has the one ability, and if you can kill the plants early, it's not going to be nearly as effective. But Steel is going to be starting up his blue buff on his own. Neo does have a leash, so he'll be a little bit ahead in terms of running around the jungle. And with that fervor of battle is going to be a very interesting choice. It means he's looking to do a little bit more damage, not have the same kind of sustain if he had gone with something such as the Warlord's Bloodlust or the Grasp of the Undying and longer fights, and it implies to me that he's going to be looking for a much more aggressive early build. In solo queue, you often see the Warwick building directly into the Tiamat, completely skipping out on the jungle item for a long time, simply going for that early damage and that early sustain provided by that item. Otherwise, Steel going for a fairly standard buff to buff start. Right here, potentially looking for an early gank towards the top lane. Opperman pushed into his own turret, but right now, look at the difference in that KDA. USG, really focusing a little bit more towards the top in the ADC, but DNG just having an immense KDA on Steel and Utapon for that last series, as they both went effectively deathless. And just having so many kills on both of those members, it's no surprise that they have some of the best KDAs in the entire LJL right now. And already, Utapon having a 10 CS lead at only 3 minutes up against her ready. And look at the power that this Karma Caitlyn lane is really bringing down. Enti is not able to contest with the amount of damage they do, simply because of how well Utapon and Vivid are doing at killing those plants as soon as they spawn. But at the same time, the mid lane, Saros is facing a lot of trouble against this Cassiopeia. Steel is here, though, is going to not land the cocoon, but some good damage getting put down onto her mind. Just popping in, the accelerated shock blast is going to get him a little bit more freedom in this lane as Neo pops down here to the bottom lane. But remind, as soon as Steel leaves, goes right back to shoving Saros into the mid lane. Neo does get spotted out there by a ward, and still Utapon and Vivid are just building up a large lead so early in the game. And this aggression, both here and in the top lane, Paz is pushing Opperman around, and as Opperman starts to run out of mana, the individual laning power of DFM could potentially carry them very far in this game. Yeah, again, look at how much pressure they put on. Enti throws out the Q, doesn't do a whole lot with it, and Utapon and Vivid just run away from the plants. Hey, it doesn't matter if you put down those plants. They're not going to follow us at all. We're just going to come in and auto-attack you, and I really like the way that Utapon and Vivid are moving around as a unit just to get pressure down on everybody. Right now, we are just going to see Neo getting this Scuttle Crab and potentially finding a good gank onto the rest of the team. He does not spot out Steel here, but that ward will spot him in just a moment as they start to move around. DFM have a good idea of where he is at the moment, but Saros is Saros is struggling right now. He's down about a little over 10 CS, about 12 against Remind's Cassiopeia, and we saw a little bit of the strength of Cassiopeia, especially at MSI, where Faker was bringing that out against whose LeBlanc was it? Was it the Was it the Gigabyte Marines? I believe it was the Marines mid laner who's just had so much trouble just getting anywhere near the minion wave early. Steel does not deal with that control ward. I wonder if he saw it. That's one of the things that no matter what rank you get to, if you're not paying attention to where that stuff is, it's not going to matter that you saw it. You're going to have to pick something up later on. But right now, Steel is still in Neo's jungle, taking away all those camps. And even though he knows that he's in vision, he's still going to continue doing so anyway. Neo's going to trade it back for the other Raptor camp. But that's not going to be a surprise to Steel whatsoever. You do see these people moving around very comfortably in each other's jungles. Steel does see the Krug's up and is going to take that as well, but gets spotted out once again by a ward, and this one could be much more dangerous. And he's going to come back and try and harass him off of that. And a good spot right here. He does manage to smite away a little bit. Neo's not 6 yet, but Saros does have both the health and mana advantage over Remind, finally getting a little bit more out of that, but still struggling. Over 10 CS down. And a similar story down in the bot lane and in the top lane. And the CS discrepancies in this game are absolutely staggering, honestly, for how early we are in the game. 15 CS up in the top lane, 10 CS in the mid lane, and 10 CS down in the bot lane as well. Just the individual laning power of these players, this is kind of what you start to expect when you got these strong teams coming at each other, just really going for it, and they both are competing to stand at the top. If one team is able to get the 2-0 here, they're going to be stand right alongside Rampage with a 4-0 record, 2-0 in sets, and just stand tall at the top. But Neo is going to find this red buff here for Steel, or away from Steel, steal it from Steel, and have it stolen. Alright, I'll stop. But Steel's not going to be able to deal with it real quick. Neo does grab that, does hit that level 6, and is going to be in a fantastic spot to begin ganking. He does opt for the Tracker's Knife, getting that extra vision down. So not quite the same as what you'd see in solo queue, and he's just going to go back and pick up his own blue buff and be a very happy camper as Remind comes over, picks it up, and he's going to be in a good spot to start dealing with Jace. And right now, Optiman is also very happy with the way that things are starting to shape up. Paz is in a little bit of a power trough right now as Optiman does have his ultimate available, and Steel knows that. It wouldn't be surprising at all if Optiman were to go aggressive very soon, especially if they don't have a good idea where Neo is. They do spot him out moving into the bottom side of the jungle, and that could be the go button up here in the top lane, as Steel has a great turret diving possibility with that champion, and knowing that he's there, they are going to have to back out, and we'll see Optiman's teleport up to this top lane very soon in all likelihood to try and make sure that Paz and Steel do not put too much damage down onto the turret. And yeah, he does pick up the Tiamat, head up north. That's not going to be any surprise at all. Neo's finding another pink ward here in the jungle, and the gold is starting to mount in both directions. The CS lead for Utapon is part of it is from the plants. That has not been changed quite yet, and the two ADCs are neck and neck in terms of their itemization. Utapon opting for the early Mercury treads, actually a very interesting decision. But it does make sense, especially coming out of the Enchanted Crystal era that's going to be coming out, the Binding Roots coming out from Zyra, and the magic damage just being provided by Remind and Enti. So, an interesting choice especially with the strength of Ninja Tabi right now in the meta. But ultimately, they are still right next to each other in terms of power. Uh-oh, Neo gets ulted. There's two flashes coming out, and he's just going to go down. No chance to repel in that noxious poison. And that is going to be the first blood going over to Remind, not the player you want to be giving gold over to. Even though Saros is a very strong player here in the mid lane, Remind is in a very strong position. He's up 16 CS, and that's actual CS, not plant CS. Now with the first blood, Saros is going to be in a rough position. He's going to be building towards that, towards the Yomu's Ghost Blade, but he's going to be behind at this point. He's going to be significantly behind, and he's going to have to rely on the rest of the team to really help push them through the mid game. Jace will snowball incredibly hard if he gets ahead, but in order to snowball, you need to be ahead. And right now, Neo is just going to be looking around. Steel is in the area once again, but Saros does not have a whole lot of mana to do anything with. Steel and Neo finding each other a little bit, but not a whole lot of damage coming out of that. One of the strengths that Jace often has in a lot of lanes is the ability to get a lot of mana back off of the W he has. The static field on the hammer form will get a lot of mana back every time you auto attack something, but he doesn't have the opportunity to do so in this lane. If he tries to get anywhere near the creeps in his hammer form, he's just gonna get assaulted by tons of poisons by the twin fangs coming out of Remind. And because of that, he's much more likely to run out of mana in this game than he necessarily would against a lot of other mid laners. Hawkshot is coming out, does spot out Steel a little bit, as well as the ward he just put down. But Utapon, Enchanted Crystal Arrow does land upon him, is forced to flash out, even with the Mercury Treads. But it is enough to keep him in a good spot, still taking a good chunk of damage from these plants provided by Enti's ultimate. But still a danger spot. You don't want to be forced to use your summoners defensively like that, especially as that player. He likes to be able to move forward with that flash, with the ultimates available. And right now, we are starting to stabilize in just about all of our lanes, as Paz and Optimum. That CS lead has not changed significantly there. It's maybe slightly growing towards Paz once again, but the same thing can be said in the mid lane and in the bot lane. But we aren't going to see significant breakpoints in the rest of this game until we start to get towards these dragon fights. And with the first one being a cloud, neither team is super worried about a cloud dragon. If anybody, it would definitely be USG trying to get it onto that Warwick, onto Opperman's Jarvan, so they can get into these team fights and force fights more freely. But until then, these teams are just going to seem to be very contented with the way that the lanes are going right now, with the slight advantages being built up. And as long as Steel doesn't get caught out again and give more advantages over to USG, it is going to slowly, we're just going to slowly hit the late game where both teams are pretty comfortable overall. We've seen plenty of Warwicks have super strong early later games, simply because they get very far ahead, become nearly unkillable, the sustain tank almost, and how much damage and how much sustain they do provide. We are going to see the blue buff heading over to Saros here in a moment, but that is going to give Neo and Remind an opportunity to start heading up towards this top lane, knowing that there will be no response from Detonation FocusMe, and Paz is very much aware of this, knows that he won't have any support, and Opperman moving forward is going to be able to do things. But this is what happens when these two teams play against each other. They match each other move for move. You know, when you go to take your blue, you see movement by the other team, and everybody's spotting each other out with wards right now. It does throw down the control ward, but if you make a move, I'll make a move, and because of that, we'll get to both trade all these different objectives. And they're not even major objectives yet. They are such small advantages. Getting a ward down here, getting a ward down there, picking up this blue buff, picking up these raptors is very important. Neo missing that ward with the sweeper a little bit, so he is spotted out, but it is enough to persuade Steel to stay away from the bot lane turret, not in a safe position to go under that turret, especially with the teleport back up from Opperman. right now. This blue buff is going to help Saros quite a bit. Even though he's standing in this poison, he is sitting on that completed Ghost Blade, and Steel with the high mobility is going to come here and force Remind back a little bit. But Enti is also in the area, and both these teams are just roaming around, and this is the kind of play we want to see. Steel not landing the cocoon, just getting a little bit of damage onto Enti. The Hawk Shot comes out, dissuading the teams from really doing anything. It's like, hey, I see you. And right now, just the game is very much settled into a small position where any single error by either of these teams could blow this game wide open. Viserys is doing better for himself overall. While he's still not in a great position, he does have a full completed item. Going to be building towards a Hex Drinker in a moment, I'm very sure, just to reduce all the magic damage coming out of Enti. Uh-oh. Paz is getting aggressed on the Cataclysm, does go down. There's a Slicing Maelstrom, but he's forced to flash out. Gets a stun onto his opponent. But here comes Neo. He does have his Flash and Ultimate available. Not going to be enough. Forces the Yomus out of Saros actually. And Steel, now knowing where his opponent is, and knowing that Optimum does not have an Ultimate available, is going to be hovering around this top lane right here. Paz has already gotten back to full health with that Blade of the Ruined King, and they're going to try and take down this turret, and they should be successful in doing so. First turret going down right here in favor of Detonation FocusMe. Good gold, taking the gold lead in this game. But that also, with the jungler and the top lane on the other side of the map, opens up an opportunity for Unsold stuff to really try and find an opening here. Neo is looking around the back. He could very easily come in onto Saros in just a moment, and he is coming around. He does not land the ultimate. That was actually really weird to watch. It didn't look like it went the way it wanted to, but Paz and Steel around here, they get the ultimate, or the stun down onto him, and here comes Saros getting not enough damage through the damage reduction, but he does end up going down as Remind does take him down. Doesn't even need to use his Flash or his Ignite. And what an odd chain of events is Saros is just not able to power through. Utapon and everybody is here except for Neo, who is back to sustaining back up in the jungle. But ultimately, Saros does end up going down, blows both summoners, and is going to be in a very dangerous position in the next couple of minutes without either of that. With Remind starting to get much larger, he has the completed Rod of Ages, the Tear of the God is starting to stack up, and he's going to go back, likely build towards a Morellonomicon as well, so he'll have plenty of damage, plenty of burst against this Jace, who is not opting for Hex Drinker, is instead opting directly for the Black Cleaver, knowing he'll get the blue buffs, but in a dangerous spot in terms of his, in terms of his life. He doesn't have any resistances. He's relying on the raw stats and the health provided by the Black Cleaver and the extra armor and magic resist presented by the Mercury Hammer. But Paz is starting to grow a larger and larger lead, and we've seen time and time again why Kennen is banned at the professional scene so often, simply because it provides so much split push power. And Paz, in the last couple of games we've seen him play, has done that very effectively. He's been able to push against, he pushed against Satri with plenty of power, and even got a couple of solo kills under the inhibitor turret. Right now, though, Neo and Remind are going to start up this Rift Herald, and they should do it pretty dang fast. Neo is, or Warwick could solo this very quick, or very easily, not necessarily quickly, but with Remind coming up, Remind's Cassiopeia is always very good at taking down objectives, simply because the repeated Twin Fangs. And Saros' turret being gone, he needs to be even more careful than before, especially now with no summoners, and Neo could be anywhere with that ultimate once again. Cloud Dragon still hasn't been taken yet. Neither team is really putting a lot of effort towards it. There's not that much vision in the area either. Both teams contented to just, trade these objectives, get a couple of turrets, and just let their lanes continue to, to do what they're doing. Trading away the Jace, though, is not something I'm a big fan of. And this is interesting. They're going to start the 20-minute Baron simply because they have the power of the Cassiopeia and the Warwick. They're not going to be taking that much damage, but DFM have some idea of what's going on. They're pinging towards it, and they're taking a lot of damage. Neo is already down to half, misses the ultimate once again. The Slicing Maelstrom is going to stun him up, but the Cataclysm is going to keep Paz in the same spot. That's a single kill going over to Saros as Paz gets traded back. But there's the ultimate coming out, and Steel goes down as well. That is a 3-0 Cassiopeia. She is going to be a huge problem for DFM, and right now Remind is showing exactly why he is the prime star of Unsold Stuff Gaming. Well, it was a good job of DFM to move down and actually contest that Baron, having an idea of what's going on. Hey, we don't see anybody. Hey, where could they possibly be? Oh, wait, they have a really good objective team. It's a very unfortunate result overall as they do give another kill over to the mid lane. And he does have the Seraph starting to stack up. And right now we do see this arrow coming on. This arrow is actually huge, being sent out by Hereti, hitting Steel, facing the wrong, or he is facing the wrong direction for the stun, but it doesn't matter. Just getting the extra damage from the Cryptic Gaze, Petrifying Gaze out is going to be enough as he just stands in poison, unable to move, and just twin fanged down. Now, spiders have some pretty strong fangs, but they're nothing when compared to the snake coming out of Remind. We do see it's an interesting thing right now as on 7-11, the patch that's live for everybody around the world, Runin's Hurricane did get nerfed, particularly for Caitlyn, but already teams here are shifting away from it. We've seen Static Shiv built by Utori earlier, and now it's being built by Utapon as well, despite how strong Runin's Hurricane still is on this patch. And there we see the Rift Herald coming into great effect. Neo does finally use it in the bot lane, does manage to secure the second turret of the game for Unsold Stuff. And here again, Neo and Inti are finding their way around behind Utapon and Steel. Teleport coming out. Steel is caught up once again. Does have his flash. Is going to have to use the repel and try and get away. But he's going to be taken down in just a moment. That's a fourth kill going over to Remind in the mid lane. And DFM is just all out of sorts right now, and they don't have anything to do. There's another Enchanted Crystal Arrow going down onto Vivid. That's another kill going over, this time to Enti. But we talked a little bit about all the engage tools that Unsold Stuff Gaming have available to them. That Enchanted Crystal Arrow, Neo jumping on top of someone, not Evie, Opperman's driving, just being able to flag and drag Cataclysm onto any target he likes. And right now they're going to be starting up a 23-minute Baron. They're taking a lot of damage of this objective, but with Steel dead, there's no threat of a smite. They jump on Paz. He takes a lot of damage, forced to heal out immediately. Utapon's trying to get damage onto Opham and pick that up, but it is going to be an easy secure by Neo as they pick up the 23-minute Baron. And that's disaster for Detonation FocusMe. There's not a whole lot they're really going to be able to do. Paz is not strong enough to split push effectively against Opperman, especially when a single arrow, when Neo can come out of nowhere, the three-man coming out from Remind, Hereti, and Enti should be able to deal with almost anything Detonation FocusMe throws at them, simply because if there's an engage that they don't like, they'll just walk away. There's nothing they can do. They throw out the grasping roots, they throw out the volley, they throw out all the poison that Remind is able to provide, and there's nothing that Detonation FocusMe can do. They want to siege up, but when they have so many engage tools that they have to deal with, it's not safe for them to do so. And unless they wait until really late game and hope that Unsold Stuff makes a mistake, there's not going to be a whole lot that they can do. And with the Cloud Drake finally being taken, it's going to be even more dangerous as Opperman and Neo can run at you even faster. Neo is going to take this very quickly. All that extra attack speed coming out against a low health target does pick that up. And with a 6,000 gold lead at 24 minutes, it's not necessarily the largest gold lead, but it doesn't have to be. Just the fact that they're ahead means that they prevent DFM from playing the game that they want to. And they're going to start taking all these turrets. The Baron buff is doing so much work at the 25-minute mark. They pick up another turret for themselves. That's 4 turrets to 1, 6 to 1 in kills with the Cloud Drake, and they're going to start moving in, potentially starting to threaten these inhibitor turrets. Not quite on pace with Rampage versus Rascal Jester game 1, but still in a very, very dominating fashion. And Detonation FocusMe, well, they still need to focus on this game. The game's not over yet. The game's never over until the Nexus has exploded, but it's about as over it can be. Other than that, they're gonna have to start thinking about what they can do to fix their draft, to fix what they can do with their composition. Because right now, this composition is not gonna win a game unless you dominate the lanes. And unfortunately, with Steel getting caught out a couple of times, Saros just not able to have the effect he wanted in the mid lane on, an early power pick. They picked that Jace as their third pick, and it hasn't been paying off for them whatsoever. It's almost something that you might have wanted to throw up to Paz in the top lane, let him play against that Jarvan, and then just start to push in something else, something like the Ahri. And Ahri might not be the best idea, but there's so many options that he still had available to him. The Talia, the Orianna, just something safe, something consistent. Um, even something like the Zed. But Cassiopeia is just a very, you know, domineering mid laner, and unfortunately, that Jace, which is something that relies a lot on snowballing to do well in the professional level games, when you put it up against this kind of lane, there's just not a whole lot that it, can do. It's not set up for success. It's set up for failure, unfortunately. And right now, with Unsold stuff being in a much stronger position around the map, they're able to just really do kind of whatever they want. They do get the cocoon down onto Remind, but there's not any more damage coming onto him. Just the Spiderlings, the Leandries coming out, and Steel is also opting for the more aggressive Runic Echoes Leandries, at least that we saw Tussle going for as well. DFM has a good amount of wave clear available to them still, with the Shock Blast, with the Inner Flame, with the Volatile Spiderling, and Caitlyn's Q just coming across the team. They should be fine to clear waves for a while, but you can only do that for so long. If you are stuck inside your own base, you aren't getting the extra gold from your jungle, you aren't getting any barons, you aren't getting any dragons, and those objectives are all going to slowly go over to unsold stuff. And we do see, it looks like Heretti is going to be opting for a more crit-oriented build, just like we saw on the Xayah earlier. It's going from the Essence Reaver into the Phantom Dancer into uh, almost definitely the Infinity Edge, simply because of how much damage it provides across the team. Huge crits, huge cooldowns. You can be able to throw out that volley, and more importantly, the Enchanted Crystal Arrow as often as you want, and just giving so much threat. One of the things that we talk about in the bot lane a lot of times is a Blitzcrank hook. Uh-oh, there comes the Enchanted Crystal Arrow. The Reddit downvote, not gonna land on anyone. Just dodged out by Utapon cross map. And it was a little bit far out for even Remind and NT to act upon. But, can't fault him for it. He does have a decent amount of cooldown reduction, and he's not going to be punished too hard for it, simply because DFM doesn't have a way to punish him for it. But the threat of abilities like Enchanted Crystal Arrow, of Blitzcrank's Rocket Grab, of Thresh's Death Sentence, all these hooks that you see down in the bottom lane, oftentimes the threat of landing them is more impactful than actually landing them. Simply because it gives you a long-range engage tool that you wouldn't otherwise have. And just having that Enchanted Crystal Arrow means that Detonation FocusMe, as long as it's up, they need to respect the fact that at any time, any of them could be engaged upon if you don't see where Heretti is. We do see Paz building towards that, full Yordle build. The Runaan's Hurricane, the Blade of the Rune King, and the Frozen Mallet will be completed soon, but Opperman has already finished his third item, picking up that Gargoyle Stone Plate, the exact same build path as every Jarvan around the world we're used to seeing. You remember old GA with the MR and the armor? Well, here's new GA. It's called Gargoyle Stone Plate. I hope you enjoy it. Just get 50% damage reduction across your tank. It's pretty good. But right now, Unsold stuff is just starting to set up vision around this Baron. The next dragon's going to be spawning in about 30 seconds? 15 seconds. And that's going to be the next objective they take, almost definitely. Neil will be able to take that very quickly if Heretti and NT choose to show up. It'll be pretty easy, but with the next Baron live right now at 30 minutes, they do see Vivid having just completed his back. Unsold stuff is going to be in a great position to do whatever they want. They have also picked up their Rylai's, increasing NT's ability to really take down and chase down anybody he likes with those plants, with the slow provided by the Rylai's. And they're just more than happy to just do whatever they want. They do not land the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, but Utapon is forced to flash out of that one. Interesting 90 caliber net, moving him in potentially the wrong direction. NT is getting knocked down pretty low from these accelerated shock blasts coming out from Saros. If I had to guess, he's probably building towards the Duskblade as his next item so they can get a little bit more vision sweeping, so they have more freedom to move around their own jungle. But right now, Remind's just going to be contentedly destroying any vision that Detonation FocusMe have here in this Baron Pit. And the reason they're throwing around control wards instead of just regular vision wards, as you'll often see elsewhere, is simply because of the fact that control wards don't get blocked by other control wards. You can always still see them, and Neil's hitting the Baron, not necessarily the best idea, but he's going to be able to get out. He'll be able to back and sustain up pretty soon. DFM does find a turret in the bot lane as Paz is not leaving anytime soon. He's actually going to be moving towards the Cloud Drake right here and probably picking that up pretty securely for himself, I have to imagine, or just picking up the Scuttle Crab and creating a larger safety net. He is picking up that Cloud Drake. Gonna be able to equalize that pretty easily. Neil is nowhere nearby to contest it. But that is the start of the Baron. They do pick up the Cloud Drake. Opperman is not nearby, but he has his teleport available, looking for a good opportunity. Steel is looking to really keep up his namesake, but there's the Enchanted Crystal Arrow. Lands onto Utapon. He doesn't have anywhere to go. Excuse me, that's Vivid. But there goes the repel. That is the first kill, and Paz is here on the backside, but he's not the Yordle you necessarily want to be going in 1v5. Not with this build anyway. You'd be wanting something like a Kled, something like a Rumble, but they're going to go right back to the Baron, and he's getting chunked out a little bit. But DFM have a chance to contest this. They don't have the greatest thing. They do get a stun onto Remind. He's going to zone us up, but here comes Neo over the wall, trying to get everything. Opperman jumps onto Utapon with the Cataclysm, passes on the backside, doing tons of damage. Does not quite finish off already. Finally takes him down. He's going to get a double kill on the backline, assuredly, but Saros, on the other hand, does end up being the third kill in this 3-for-1. Neo is going to be running after Paz really quickly. He could definitely win that, but they're going to go right back to the Baron round 3 as Opperman Remind and now Neo are going down on it. It should be pretty easy to do. They have plenty of damage. The only people left being Paz and Vivid. There shouldn't be any way for them to contest this, is there? And no, there isn't. They do pick up that Baron for themselves, and that is a huge advantage. A 15,000 gold lead here at the 34-minute mark. And their second Baron of the game, they should be able to start pushing in, start taking these inhibitor turrets and cracking the base of Detonation FocusMe. And looking back at it one more time, Utapon's going to be in a very bad spot as they do hit the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, or excuse me, the Cataclysm onto him, and he's not in a good spot. Remind is going to be able to run after him really quickly, but Paz on the backside. This is the Yordle build, and the 2v1 power that this build has, simply because of the Runaan's Hurricane building up the enhanced auto attack off of the W, is fantastic. And he actually picks up a Last Whisper as his fourth item. We see this a lot in ADCs, and Cannon is basically an ADC, but he still does a healthy amount of magic damage. off of all of his different abilities, including his W, simply because it adds extra um I believe it's magic damage. I'd have to look that up, but it's a very interesting choice coming out. A lot of different canons will opt for something like a Wit's End, but it does make sense now. He's going to be picking up that Giant Slayer, moving towards Lord Dominic's regards in order to really help him shred down Neo and Oppamen. And even Remind, who has a much larger health pool now, sitting on the fully stacked Rod of Ages and the Rylai's, and he's nearly full build. The only thing he has left to do is trade out the Corrupting Potion and pick up another item. He's sitting on that Rabadon, and it wouldn't be surprising to see something like a Leandre's, but more likely a Void Staff, to really just sink home all the Twin Fangs in just a moment. And right now, as USG starts to collapse on the last turret outside of the walls of the base for Detonation FocusMe, it's looking grim. It's looking very grim here for Unsold, for Detonation as they come in. They need to find a way in, but the only thing they have is a good cocoon, and then Zeros or Paz just jumping on their face. We could see a strong flank coming out from Paz in the very near future, but they don't have a whole lot of time to do it. They do see the cannon minions starting to do damage to the inhibitor turrets. And Remind down here, he doesn't contribute all that much to his siege necessarily, but he does clear waves like a boss. And as Paz heads down to the bot lane, there's no risk of a flank except out of a teleport. So there's not going to be a whole lot, but this is the siege power of Detonation FocusMe. Even while they're behind, they just throw down a bunch of traps, getting some good damage onto Neo, but he should be able to sustain that in just a moment. There's not a whole lot that Unsold stuff can do other than continuing to feed minions to the turret gods, getting a little bit of damage here and there. They don't have a mountain dragon, they don't have an infernal dragon, they just have the auto attacks coming out from, Ashe, who's not the safest ADC, but still pretty solid, as well as, any cannon minions that do happen to spawn at the right time. They're going to be going in, doing some free damage to the turrets until they are cleared out. But right now, the Baron buff is only left upon Neo as we see it expiring here on Remind down here in the bottom lane. And he's sitting on well over 100 CS lead over his lane opponent. 418 CS to 289 on Saros' Jace. We do see good leads for Paz and Utapon. But unfortunately, again, they just don't have ways to force their will upon the game. They have to wait for USG to make a mistake, and with 12 gold up, even if they make a mistake, it's not necessarily a game-ending one. They've only lost 2 turrets, one in the top and one in the bot lane, and with this next dragon coming up, it's going to be a lot more difficult for Detonation FocusMe to really do anything, even if they were to even if they were to build up a clean ace while they have the triple ADC composition. They could take a couple of neutral or Unsold stuff structures, but until then, they're just waiting for Unsold stuff to make a big mistake. And we are ready with only the 2 Cloud Drakes. We're seeing this Elder Dragon come up at 38. Low emphasis on the dragons this game, but the Elder Drake could be what Unsold Stuff Gaming need to really push through. We see how quick it's coming down. Neo, Oppamen, and Heretti just treading it down with the massive crits coming out from Heretti, as he does have the double Zeal item, as well as the Infinity Edge Essence Reaver. Able to get the Ranger's focus stacks up super quickly, get massive hits off of all of those auto attacks, and right now with the 1 Dragon Elder Drake burn, it's not the most impactful thing, but any damage is helpful damage. Oppamen immediately goes in, does a ton of damage to Utapon, steals on the wrong side, forced to repel really late, and that is the inhibitor turret going down. Paz does teleport back here on the backside, and they're looking for a little bit more good damage onto Oppamen, but he's going to be able to walk right out, and with the base crack, that just means that USG are going to have to come back a little bit later. They do blow Paz's teleport, and that's going to be plenty. That's all they need to do. That means that he can't go down to the bot lane very soon, especially with the Baron spawning in about a minute. DFM might be able to get this turret back up. They really need to put gold back into their team, but Oppen's going to be teleporting onto the backside right here. Enchanting Crystal Arrow, ooh, complete field goal. Neo comes in, misses as well. All these engage tools are missing, but they got strike one, strike two. Opperman can't miss right here. He goes in, he gets into the middle of the enemy team. The Paz is slicing Maelstrom, is coming across the rest of the team, and Neo is going to be jumping on him. Remind is going to go down eventually, but it's not before they are able to pick up so many members of Detonation Focus Me. That's a 4-for-1 so far. Opperman's going to be able to find Vivid very soon, prevent him from backing, and that is going to be the end of game one, as Unsold Stuff is going to be able to push in. They still have her ready, they still have NT, they still have Neo. Opperman does give up the chase on Vivid, but with 30 seconds before the next player comes up, NT's not going to be able to do a whole lot. Vivid's going to try and stop this minion wave from getting to the enemy base, but NT's not going to let him do that. Tons of damage. Here comes Neo. That is going to be the ace coming out for Unsold Stuff, and now they're just going to start wailing on these Nexus turrets. Still 12 seconds left until Steel comes up, but they don't yet have the damage. They don't have the minion waves. And that was actually a really great move by Vivid, preventing the minion wave from arriving for Unsold Stuff and preventing the end of the game right then and there. The Baron is live right now. We're going to see Unsold Stuff go back and immediately head to that objective, as Detonation Focus Me are still respawning. They're a man down for another 15 seconds. And Unsold Stuff is going to be able to go directly to that objective. If they start it right away, they'll get there in plenty of time. And Detonation Focus Me won't have the resources to poke them off effectively. Saros is just unfortunately not doing the damage that you would need from that kind of character at this point in the game. And a little bit of hesitation right now from Unsold Stuff, but better safe than sorry overall, and they are definitely being safe. 15,000 gold lead on them right now. Neo and Remind are starting it up, and they're they're finishing it already. That's super easily got up. 3 cannon minions with the Baron buff here in this lane. They are going to be able to take this pretty easily and then transition bot lane if they feel like they need to. But Remind's going to be pushing in. They got super minions with the Baron buff in the mid lane. They are hitting this inhibitor turret right now. There's not enough traps set up by Utapone. And Vivid is getting caught out a little bit. There's not a whole lot they can do. Saros is trying to find a way in, getting some accelerated shock blasts and good damage down onto the members of Unsold Stuff, but it's not going to be a whole lot. They don't have a wave here in the bot lane. It's actually pushing hard against them, but with 2 inhibitors down, Unsold Stuff have plenty of time. They have more than half their Barons still remaining. Detonation Focus Me is staring down the barrel of the gun. And just, I don't think they're feeling lucky, man. Alpin's going to get this cleared out. Look at all the damage that Titanic Hydra does. It's actually kind of nuts how much wave clear that does provide. Remind is way forward. This could be a pick if Detonation Focus Me were to deal with it. Nobody from USG is close by, but with the Zonias and the Saras both available for him right now, he's feeling pretty peachy. And as the rest of Unsold Stuff do start to come in with this last minion wave, Detonation Focus Me is on the ropes. They need to make a miracle play happen, and it's going to be difficult to see who it comes from. It's almost definitely gonna have to come from Paz. A great flank, a good slicing Maelstrom, getting good damage on everyone, but he's not gonna have an opportunity to do so. As even here, there's tons of damage going down onto Saros. Paz is getting forced in by Opperman. They still have the Baron buff as the next wave comes in. Haredi is getting a lot of damage down onto this turret, and it does go down. The Enchanted Crystal comes across. Utapone is going to be the first to fall. Saros is going to fall immediately after him. That's 2 kills already. Opperman's going to be super far in the front, but he doesn't need to keep going. They already have the triple inhibitor, and now they can just start walking things in. Paz is trying to get things out of the base, using the Slicing Maelstrom to slow things down a little bit, but he is going to be another kill, and that's 4-for-0. Vivid is the only member of Detonation Focus Me left alive, and that is going to be the end of Game 1. GG USG as we take the lead here, 1-0 over Detonation Focus Me, Week 2 of the LJL. And the problems for Detonation Focus Me stemmed from the fact that their composition did not have any engage tools available to them. They didn't have anyone to go in other than a flank from Paz. Or potentially from Steel, maybe something silly coming out from Saros if he's able to get like a nutty flank and just get directly onto the back line. They might have something to do there, but unfortunately they just didn't. They didn't have a way to do it. Unsold Stuff's vision control was clean throughout the entire game, and they just really they didn't have a chance. They didn't have anything that they could do up against the power. All the engaged tools, not necessarily even pick tools, they could just run at you. And we didn't see Neil land almost any ultimates on that Warwick. He didn't land nearly as many suppresses as we might have hoped from that champion. And instead, they are able to take the game. Once again, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. We'll have to see exactly what it is that Detonation Focus Me chooses to do in order to bring back the series, as they're now trailing 0-1. They did not have a good draft, but if they are able to bring it back, we will have a very good series on our hands. But for now, we're going to take a short break. See you in a few minutes.